Hey everybody, I'm here again to talk about vitamin B12. This is the third part. Today I wanted to say a few more things a lot of people might not know about B12. B12, of course, if you saw part 1 and part 2, I talked about what B12 is, where it comes from in part 1, and then in part 2 I talked about how we have all these bacteria inside our bodies, and really if we just kept the bacteria healthy by keeping our body healthy, then we don't probably need to consume much B12 at all, if ever, because the daily amount, well, that's where I'm going to continue off from part 2 now at part 3. The daily amount, the amount that a human being would need on average per day is minute. It's tiny. In fact, the RDA in the US and in the USA, I believe, is something like 2.4 micrograms. Now it's an unbelievable small amount, because a gram is not much to start with. But now we're talking about micrograms, which are 1/1,000,000th of a gram. So if you need 2.4 millionth of a gram, and that's like, you won't be able to see that. It's a speck. It's a tiny little bit of vitamin B12. Some of the RDAs are higher than that. They might go up to as high as 6 or 7 micrograms, but you know, we're talking about dust, like a tiny speck of B12. But you do have to have it. So that that amount of B12, if you keep yourself healthy, the bacteria in just the mucous membranes and your small bowel will provide it every day, you know, as long as you keep it healthy and avoiding toxic products that kills bacteria. So now people have actually done experiments with hydroponics, and they've actually put vitamin B12, active and available vitamin B12, in the hydroponic fertilizer, and they found that if you eat just 2 romaine lettuce leaves that had vitamin B12 in the fertilizer in a hydroponic system, that you'll get sufficient supply of B12 on a daily basis from just 2 leaves. So that teaches us 2 things: that we don't need very much vitamin B12, but we do need it every day. And the other thing is that plants can and do contain B12 when the B12 is available to them. And so that's the problem. Most lettuce is grown conventionally, and that means that the fertilizers and all the pesticides and herbicides and all the sides that are sprayed on the ground kills all the bacteria, and the bacteria, being all dead, cannot produce B12. So there's no B12 in the soil. No B12 in the soil means there's no B12 in the plants. So the best thing is, if you have access to soil or a hydroponic system where you can actually add either cobalt or B12 to the fertilizer, and you have soil that hasn't been sprayed with any kinds of pesticides or herbicides or anything like that, and you grow organic plants, be it lettuce or vegetables of any kind or even fruits, you can actually create healthy bacteria in the soil that will produce B12. And if there's sufficient B12 in the soil, then the plants will be able to pull the B12 in through their roots, and therefore the plants will contain B12. So you can actually get B12 from plants, contrary to what most people will say, if you probably only if you grow them yourself, or if you know 100% you're getting them from a farmer who takes very good care of his soil, does not use any kinds of sides or poisons or toxic fertilizer that kills off the bacteria. Now, of course, if you consume it through the mouth, B12 consumed through the mouth requires intrinsic factor. It requires actually both intrinsic factor and acid, and your stomach makes both of these things. Your stomach makes acid and intrinsic factor, and if you have a stomach that no longer, if you have digestive problems or something, your stomach doesn't produce acid and intrinsic factor, then even if you eat all this tons and tons of B12, you're probably not going to get much value out of it, because it requires the consumption of B12 orally through the digestive system requires acid, stomach acid, and intrinsic factor in order for it to get absorbed and assimilated in the body. So that's the end of today's video about B12. I thought I might be done on the third part, but there's still more information about it, and I'll probably be coming up with part 4. We'll see you soon.